Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. It feels a little bit surreal, weird to say that, because Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim has been who I termed as the longest serving Prime Minister in waiting in the world. He has wanted this position, he has been open about it since probably 1993, even earlier than that, possibly. And finally, we are here. We do have a Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim. And what does that mean for Malaysia? And that is what we are going to discuss today with three Malaysian academics, journalists, observers. The three of them are all Malaysians. They are based in Australia, and this episode is in collaboration with the Malaysian Singapore Society of Australia. The three of them together with me, we are part of the association, and today we will be discussing what Prime Minister Tan and the entire coalition, the entire electoral scene, what it portends for Malaysia. So welcome to episode 54. So I will get them in. We let's start with the ultimate question, right? So the election, it was clearly a rejection of UMNO and Barisan Nasional, right? They were the biggest losers in that election. And right after that, they became the kingmakers. And Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi, he became the Deputy Prime Minister. How is that? My first question to the three of you is, how is that not a betrayal of the people's trust?
Who would like to go first? Okay.
Greg, you can go first, and
thanks,
and
Walid.
Ken, and then Jason. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Let me preface my responses with some assumptions that I make in all my analysis, basically. So individuals have self-interest. Individuals forming communities have self-interest. And when these individuals and communities compete for power, resources, conflicts happen. And the nature of these conflicts lead to certain structures or institutional arrangements that try to ameliorate these conflicts, and therefore they become stable until certain things happen. Otherwise, there is a path dependency that it continues until certain things, critical junctures happen, and then individuals using their agency or groups using agency either continue that path or shift those paths into new structures or create new structures. So it has been elaborated better by Professor Clive Kessler, and I would lean on also to Professor Anthony Milner, who in 2013 shared with me that, I guess born out of his thesis, Kerajaan, that the ultimate power in Malaysia are the sultans, the royal families. They are the ultimate power. I have, in my conception of them, which I'm working on, they are the key veto players. There are other veto players, but they sit at the apex of power in Malaysia. Now, so when we look at it this way, you're absolutely right that the people have been betrayed, but they have been betrayed in many different ways. The electoral system itself is a betrayal of the whole notion that one person has one vote. That systematically Malaysians, by and large, or a large number of Malaysians have been betrayed over the years. But this takes it to a new height. And it proves in many ways, and what Professor Clive Kessler said, that the monarchs, seeing perhaps their interests being challenged in a very existential way, namely that PAS can now say that the people are with us and not with you, the defenders of the faith. the royal families quickly came together, and and they had some legitimacy. You know, PH was still the biggest coalition in a plurality, and then you know how Perikatan Nasional so rudely in Malay culture, so rudely democratically right, but very rudely dismissed the idea by none other than the Agung himself. I guess played into the hands of Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional. So betrayal at one level, but intrinsically it just fit how decisions are made in Malaysia. That's my
Right. Okay. Okay. That's very interesting because you're pinning in your answer. You're pinning this on the Sultan and not on Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim himself. Okay. Okay. So Kian and then Jason.
I just think that's all terribly neat and tidy, and not reflecting the reality of the messiness of what has been about 20 plus years. And I think you give a bit too much credit to the likes of, you know, Anthony Milner's, I think, somewhat hokey old theory about the despondency, despair, and perhaps the drive of, you know, this feudal order, which in some ways really has been revived and, you know, stepped back in, one could argue, with some evidence, after a collapse of, you know, the previous government, the previous Pakatan Harapan government, and where much of that type of democratization got discredited. And in a way, you also had the perfect storm of a pandemic and a need for, you know, governance to work in whatever way that was possible to deliver to, you know, a frightened rakyat or frightened populace. But that's not unusual. It happened across the world. You know, governance was called into question everywhere, not just Malaysia. So I think Clive, I think, most recent article that was published on Asia Link Insights is probably much closer, better approximation of what I think is the truth and what is more correct in terms of how the so-called feudal order was part of this element, and I don't think it's so easy to say it's a betrayal. Betrayal of what exactly? I think people also underestimate the agency of Malaysian people. I think it sort of, to me, reminds me of the introduction that I'd written to our book, Rebirth, where talking about GE15 and something that became very clear with lots of voters across the country then hoping and voting for change and getting that change, that they didn't expect anything more than what was, you know, what political scientists might consider only a short-term, middle-term sort of perspective. They expected betrayal, they expected broken promises, but at the same time, as was apparent through the pandemic and through the, you know, black flag, you know, saga of the Kita Jaga Kita hashtag era of faith in your neighbors and your neighborhood to bail you out of tough conditions, that Malaysians themselves, I think, are quite adept and understand that they can only rely on themselves to some extent. I know there's a bit of a paradox because at the same time, people say, you know, Malaysians expect a lot from their government and therefore they feel, you know, let down or whatever. But I think people underestimate Malaysians and their resilience. And I think they also underestimate the Malaysian electorate's now in voting for what they've got now. And to some extent, I think the evidence is increasingly showing that there has been a compounding of that protest vote against UMNO, against what has been resoundingly, two elections in a row now, a vote against corruption and a lack of integrity. There is clearly a demand or a desire for better integrity in politics. The question is, how do we
Right.
get there? Who articulates it the best? And elections are one snapshot in time, I think. But they
Right. So why, based on that, why wouldn't doesn't that contradict the earlier part of your answer? Why wouldn't that be a betrayal if would it be fair to say that Zaid Hamidi in UMNO now represents what the people were rejecting, and he got the most coveted position, right?
Sure. I think
Is there a need to
no, I think
overcomplicate
it's
things?
fair
Yeah.
that many people feel very let down. If you follow, social media sort of commentary, especially the Malay language social media, there are a lot of long-standing, hardcore PKR supporters that I know who feel that that's a big letdown. At the same time, I think we underestimate a lot of people's understanding of how they also understand politics is in many ways trying to deliver in a very difficult, messy reality. And a lot of people
Right.
have gone through,
Right.
excuse me for saying this, but they've gone through a lot of shit over the last 2+ years. And people are traumatized, but they also know at the end of the day, they need better governance. Government has a critical role. But again, Malaysia is not unique in this. We see this worldwide.
Of
So,
course.
so I think to play around with a lot of the theoretical models, I think it's useful, but at the end of the day, it's overly simplistic.
Right. So is it so? I'll get to Jason in a while, right? Because this is not, I guess, not about Kessler or about Milner, right? Because this was the entire basis of Anwar Ibrahim's campaign, right? His song was about a rejection of the robbers of Anwar. Anwar Ibrahim always has a campaign song, right? And this time it was explicitly about that. And when it came to light that while he was singing that song, he actually had done deals with the ultimate robber, quote unquote, himself, right? Where does that? I guess the entire reason for voting for Pakatan has been, it's about the moral ground, right? But they have ceded that entirely, right, in the past 2 years, especially with Zaid. Even if they had allied with UMNO and they say it's a necessary evil, whatever that is, surely a precondition would be that Zaid Hamidi cannot be in the cabinet or something like that. But even then, they capitulated, right? So ultimately, is PM10 any different from any other opportunistic political actor that we've seen? Not just in Malaysia, but anywhere else.
Yeah. Just
Jason, I don't
quickly,
know.
far
Yeah,
be it for me
can.
to defend PM10 and his cabinet and this new government, but I think the facts bear out that this is a differently motivated government than the previous two in the last 2-3 years. Okay, it also is different from a BN government of the Najib and before era. I don't think anyone has grounds to say this is the same old, really. Come on. The fact
So,
that there is a Borneo bloc of a substantial, they have a far more substantial sort of say right now. There is far more ground being made now about the MA63 agenda. How can that be the same as before?
So the ends justify the
Isn't that
means,
politics
basically, you're
in
saying.
Malaysia? Or actually much of the region?
No, that, that can be the case, right? But the problem is, I suppose, right, what I've seen from academics and civil society in general, I can imagine if PN had done that, there is no way people would justify it in the way that it's being justified. Absolutely no. Even before the government was formed, you saw people softening the ground for a Zahid Hamidi, like, and people were saying Anwar had no choice. What was there a gun to his
Uh,
Well,
head
there
or
was.
something?
Walid,
Like,
There was.
what? He made that
There
choice,
was.
right? Yeah.
Walid
Yeah.
and
He
Ken,
made that choice.
Jason, I think Jason wants to say something,
Yeah.
but I'd like to respond to the both of you
Sure. Yeah.
with my neat theoretical models. But Jason,
I think I bring in a very different perspective to it because I live on the ground, and I've been observing the people, talking to the people, especially the non-Malay Muslim crowd. I've been talking to them and hearing what they have said. And to go back to Walid's original question, there certainly there are several layers of betrayal, depending on who you talk to. First of all, especially in the Chinese community, let's just start with the Chinese community, right? Or I say non-Malay Muslim community. There is a sort of celebration that, yes, once again, we rejected BN, we rejected Muhyiddin's, Malay Muslim crowd, and especially PAS. Actually, the biggest enemy at the time for a lot of non-Malay Muslims was PAS. It wasn't Muhyiddin, it wasn't UMNO. I mean, if you remember the things that come up from DAP was we're willing to work with anyone. And of course, BN, UMNO, especially UMNO, rejected outright. No, we're not going to work with you regardless, right? But yet, you see Anwar sort of, and not just Anwar, but DAP putting that olive branch out in case. I feel that they knew something was going on. I mean, probably I'm wrong, I'm not, but I'm talking about grassroots reactions, right? When Pakatan failed to capture the kind of majority they enjoyed back in 2018, there was a fear. There was a fear. And then Muhyiddin's preempt announcement, oh, we got everybody on our side, we're going to form a government. There was panic. To be honest, there was mass panic. People were making memes, bad jokes, or whatever you call it. I mean, they were fearing that, oh God, we're going to become an Islamic nation, regardless. Everybody was, all the conspiracy theories were coming out of the woodwork, right? And then we see that the horse trading, as I call it. But on the other hand, as Greg has pointed out, and also I think Kian also pointed out, it is a rejection of BN, right? For what it is, the first thing is, like you said, or you guys said, is the rejection of the robbers. They want the Penyamun out of power. But yet, when the numbers came about, number of parliament seats, right? Nobody had majority, and that was when the panic starts to set in. Right? Everybody start making announcements, and then their counter announcements and this and that. It got to a point where, for the grassroots, especially the non-Malay Muslim community, it's like anything but pass. It's fine, anything but pass. So when talks come about where, a picture showed up where the Pacific Hotel, or I forgot what, Sri Pacific Hotel, where they had this meeting, shaking hands and all that, right? It went viral. Everybody said, oh, good, we're going to have the mood is like, oh, we're going to have a government that's non-pass. That was all in people's mind, right? It's not about rejection of, everybody knows Zahid. They did dislike Zahid. To be honest, especially Chinese community had a very, very intense dislike of anything UMNO, especially Zahid, right? V. Kasyong goes number 2, okay, but different story. But so when that talk came about, people were started to talk, to say, okay, there is a chance to capture Putrajaya without past participation. To be honest, there are a significant members of the non-Malay Muslim community saying Muhyiddin is not bad, but it's just too bad he's with PAS, so we have to reject him. So that's right. So when the government was formed between Pakatan with UMNO and then plus the Borneo bloc, the people don't see that. Especially for the non-Malay Muslim community, it's not a betrayal. Like what you said was, it's a necessary evil, and the people were okay with that. There was no mass protest or at least there was no.
So basically, what you're saying is the people, the Malay community would have been okay with any form of government, any way it was formed, as
That's
long
right.
as it didn't
That's
include
right. Which
PAS.
is why when Sabah and Sarawak jumped over and formed the government, they was cheering. People were happy. You know, it's better than World Cup, to be honest. So you, okay, I know sacrilege, but
Because
that's
Malaysia
why.
didn't
That's why.
qualify,
I know
that's
it's
why.
sacrilege. Greg's gonna give me a hard time. But anyway, but my point is, you know, I mean, living here on the ground during election day and all that, and observing all this, right? I see that people say, you know, it's fine. So there was not really a betrayal, but and then when Muhyiddin rejected Agong's call
Right.
for you know unity government, there was actually, I mean, figuratively speaking, hand clapping. Good, Anwar had a chance. So that was the whole thing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I completely get
Yeah.
it. I mean, this is real
Yeah,
politics,
Realpolitik,
right?
yeah.
This is real politics. So, but can you see how someone, a conservative Malay conservative Muslim who rejected UMNO, looks at this entire situation and looks at how you guys are justifying or rationalizing the situation, and look, these guys have been moralizing this whole while. They've been talking about principles all this while, but the first opportunity they had to get power, all the morals
So,
and principles went out of
yeah,
the
so
window. Would that be
I'd like
fair?
to.
I think you've
Yeah.
forgotten something here. UMNO was in power for the last two governments, by the way.
So,
And the last
Yes.
prime minister,
But those were not elected.
was an UMNO prime
Those
minister.
were not elected. Yes.
And
But those were not
and
elected.
there is no UMNO
There's a
prime
huge
minister
difference
this time.
between this.
Yeah.
so
Can I
go ahead, Jason.
sorry, because I also spoke with my Malay Muslim friends, right, whose family members are hardcore UMNO supporters and some are hardcore PAS supporters, and they spoke to me that why there was a mass vote for PAS, as many of you have spoken in many places and heard many times, it was a mass rejection of UMNO, right? Najib's conviction was part one of a rejection. Right. Part two was to reject Zahid when he got out of conviction. So they said, well, since the idea, the attitude was that since Zahid got away with it, that means the other UMNOs, UMNO kleptocrats are going to get away with it. So why not punish them through the vote? So it's not a matter of they truly buy into PAS's agenda or political aims. It's about punishing UMNO. This is what they told me. So sorry, Greg, you can go ahead.
So
and that was GE15's lesson, by the way.
Yes, correct. I agree.
So just to clarify to the point that I want to make. Disclaimer, or the words that I'm using, it's not a legal, I'm not using it from a legal sense or has any normative value to it. I'm just stating facts. And yes, I use models, must be my training as an economist. And for me, the players are not important. I'm talking about structures over time. Okay. So now point number one, the Malaysia's political system is essentially based on racism and corruption. Okay. It's a distributional coalition that brings together elites of ethnic groups and then distribute the resources through some formula. That's essentially Barisan Nasional. Okay, it is a state that has been created by the British imperialists to serve their purpose, and they chose these elites. So in the first instance, the formation of Malaysia was never about the Malaysian people. It was to protect colonial interest and their representatives in Malaysia. Now they've taken their own trajectory. But the point I'm making, so I'm looking at the superstructure. There are nuances, the kind that Kian is making. I'm saying people are always betrayed. When the Kelantan State Assembly emergency was declared and overturned democratically elected representatives, betrayal. Sarawak, removal of the chief minister, betrayal. Sabah, the politics, the Swart Stevens and so forth. This is betrayal. Betrayal has been part and parcel of Barisan Sheraton. But throughout Malaysian history, if you read Tun Razak's books on Tun Razak, how he, coerced people after 69 was a betrayal. Okay, the socialists competed in an already unfair system and did well, and the results were nullified. So betrayal is part and parcel of Malaysia's political system. Okay, that is the point I'm trying to make, which Milner has a view that who makes decisions ultimately is not the people of Malaysia. Now, if they vote a particular way and it is what the people in power want, okay, then it is justified. Okay, then this is. But when the people in power don't like what is happening, then they will make the call. They will declare emergency. They will do all sorts of that. So that's how I see betrayal. And this leads to what I'm trying to say. There are veto players at the top. There is a superstructure. GPS Sarawak coming in now, if you look at the number of ministers and deputy prime ministers, huge number. They are not going to change the way Malaysia is governed. That's the point that you could have a Sarawakian prime minister. He will not change the way Malaysia is governed. That's what I'm trying to say. There is an idea of Malaysia, how it is governed. The elections are a facade it's a way for Malaysians to vent, and then decisions are made by those right at the pinnacle of power into a way that they see Malaysia. Now, it's not static. It is changing, as we can see this. And that's where the competition among these veto players will then change the nature of how what the people want will change. That's all I'm saying. So betrayal, part and parcel of Malaysia. There is no moral politician in Malaysia. Please pass moral. Give me a break. The system is based on corruption and racism. They're not in a dirty way, but it's a ability.
But you see, it's half an hour in, right? I mean, it's well established. UMNO and Barisan is corrupt. It's well established. PAS is the butt of jokes and memes. It's well established. But I get a hesitancy on the part of civil society and academics to be even critical of Anwar Ibrahim, especially now, right? Is it because they see, there is, as Jason said, PAS is a bigger enemy. So they will always talk about PAS. Even when Anwar was appointing Zahid, they were concerned about what some PAS MP was saying somewhere rather than the ultimate choice, right? So is that do you think that hurts the Malaysian government, hurts Malaysian civil society, right? Even people whom came on my show and said something else, they were preparing the ground for DPM Zahid just before he was appointed. So is that an ideal state of civil society, or is civil society just carrying water for... I used to think they used to carry water for anything non-UMNO, but it seems like they're carrying water for anything
I want
non-PAS
to
now.
maybe probably add into the depression train that I think it is in a way Malaysian society, from what I observe, is that we are kind of like, say, realpolitik, right? And you're right. As long as their golden child gets elected, it doesn't matter. It can do no wrong. And you're right. There's a hesitancy to criticize Anwar. You can read it in the news. You can see other people's attitude. No one is openly, blasting Ismail Sabri or even Muhyiddin back then. If you allow me to draw another example, which is not really exactly, but okay.
Sure.
When Lim Guan Eng was chief minister, if you talk to people from Penang, they will have a lot of negative things to say about him. But yet, you see civil society doesn't say much about him. They praise him, say, oh, look at Penang, well run and clean, whatsoever. But you say, oh, no, really, there's corruption. There's a lot of hanky-panky going on. There's a lot of nonsense that shouldn't happen, And you hear people talk about arrogance, the arrogance of DAP, which I observe firsthand. So it's the same thing. It seems to me like suddenly, the black horse has gotten power, and then everybody's like, okay, we shouldn't criticize them, give them chance. But yet, I think, if civil society is not allowed to point there's an issue with the elected leaders, then it's not true democracy anymore, right? And yes, I think that people are putting too much on Anwar's plate. They expect him to fix everything. They expect Superman, right? He's not. He's mortal, and I tell you, he's not infallible, and he will screw up eventually. He will fail eventually. Not say fail completely, but he'll fail somewhere along the line. It's inevitable. It's human. So, but maybe I'm a pessimist, but hey, this is probably I'm probably one of those people who are not, especially in the non-Malay Muslim community, who don't see anything wrong with Pakatan. There is an issue. When Pakatan was in power, there were so many issues. People seem to have short-term memory or selective amnesia. I want to use a more politically correct term. So I think I kind of disagree with Greg saying that it's a way to vent, and then ultimately the one calling the shots at the top. I think people do feel empowered after 2 elections, 14 and 15, where they can change government. So,
Right.
Long story short, I think people are still expecting things to change, but yeah, I think they're counting their chicks before the eggs hatch.
Right. I think also, just to lift the spirits a little, right? It's been a depressing 35 years.
Not from me, not
What
from
Malaysia
me.
has
I
achieved over
think you guys are confusing a couple of issues here. We get confused about this issue of, the shortcomings of civil society not criticizing or whatever. I think one thing that civil society, and presumably you want to boil this down to those interested in policy development, policy wonkishness, policy implementation, people interested in notions of good governance, all of that matters a lot more with something of the hope and potential that Anwar Ibrahim's government promises, unlike the previous recent two. The other thing,
But what's the evidence for that? If the first piece is to bring Zahid as
there at least is now a possibility of discussing in as rational and evidence-based way as possible to develop better policy. It's as basic as a lot of Malaysians who I interact with online, talk to, have known, and I think outside the Klang Valley as well, which is quite important, who have quite circumspect ambitions for this government. They're not going to say, look, we expect the sun, the moon, the rainbow at the end with the pot of gold. I don't think anyone's expecting that. This is where, again, I think a lot of pundits might underestimate the smartness of the Malaysian electorate. I reckon there are a hell of a lot more smarter Malaysians out there in the small towns, the Felda settlements that I've met, than personally for me that I've met in the so-called Bangsa bubble. Far smarter people I've met in Temerloh, in Raub, in Kulim. Yeah. And, these folks I've spoken to since, on the phone. I was just talking to someone in Raub 10 days ago about, what do they feel? They were running a frozen yogurt shop. They're now just small business, running around town. And I wrote about them briefly in our book as well. 2 young women, one Melayu, one very China, okay? Both met at UPM, went into business together. How's it all feel? Again, they're so damn pragmatic. Got to hand it to them. Early 30-somethings, so pragmatic. They're saying what to do, give chance lah. Everyone's had a pretty crap 2+ years of pandemic lockdowns and closures. Let's not underestimate the trauma that lots of people have felt. It's serious.
But wait. So I'm not questioning the Malaysians' intelligence. I never did that. What I was gonna say also, what Malaysia has done is incredible. 2 peaceful, democratic turnovers. That's something to be celebrated. I do not underestimate the rationality of the Malaysian voter. I know Malaysian voters are extremely smart, extremely pragmatic. That is not the point of the question. The point of the question is about the Pakatan Harapan government
No,
and
no.
how they betray.
But
Now,
but this
once
is
the
the thing.
betrayal has been made,
But this is the thing about
voters
the
have to
government. These folks, including these two young women I spoke to, 10 days ago, were just saying, look, not even a month in government. What do you want? What do you want?
I think it's fair to say that we
No.
wouldn't want
So, Walid,
Zahid as
That's
the
that's
deputy
not
prime minister.
even
don't
the
you
issue,
think?
Walid.
Yeah. Now,
Not the issue.
You think that
For
wasn't an
now,
issue at all?
Voters want something to address bad business conditions, bad confidence, basic things like actually getting government to work again.
so
You think these people haven't been, disadvantaged over the last 2 years? It doesn't even matter whether it was Melayu, China, India here,
no, Walid, let me,
Okay, so maybe
Yeah,
let Greg make his point and then I'll respond. Yeah,
So
carry on.
you have made a very important point. Not so much for Malaysians, in my view, because as I've explained, betrayal is, Malaysians are used to betrayal. Okay, they have a long memory. They are used.
I call it broken promises myself, but anyway,
yeah. But your question is very important to the international community. If a Malaysian leader cannot be trusted, cannot be held to account for his campaign promises, how in heaven's name am I going to trust anything he says? Okay, but here is the context, and you have to understand this also. Perikatan Nasional, Muhyiddin and PAS were the first betrayers in the short period of time. The Sheraton move is perhaps in many people's view is even worse than or equivalent. A democratically elected government, first in history. Malaysia became the talking point in a world where democratic backsliding was happening.
Yep.
An Islamic government, an Islamic party, and a blood and soil Malay party overthrew or internal coup of a democratically elected multiracial party, but still Muslim majority in every sense of the word. So that in the
and UMNO was part of that betrayal, wasn't it? So
yeah,
that's double betrayal on UMNO's part. If that is going to be, I guess this is the part I don't understand. Why the hesitancy just to say that? Yes, there was. I mean, is there no other option other than PH and Zahid as the deputy prime minister and MPN?
60 years of nation building in Malaysia, and this is the Muslim leaders we produce: Anwar Ibrahim, Zahid, Ismail Sabri, Muhyiddin Yassin, Mahathir, Abdul Hadi Awang. Remember, Abdul Hadi Awang is the guy who brought schism in the Malay community like no other Muslims had brought, with that Amanat Hadi. 60 years of this, supposed to become this great Bawasan Goplo, and these are the 5-6 Malay leaders that we have. That is, for me, the bigger challenge that Malaysia has to face. Are there no other young, capable Malays? We know Malays have to lead Malaysia. That, we're okay with that. But can we develop better Malays? Can we create political parties, create better systems where, decent Malay leaders can come up rather than this, Anwar Ibrahim, Mahathir, Muhyiddin, people with Hadi Awang, terrible records. How is it that they are leaders of this party? That's the first question. Of course, then when you put this up, what option do the Malaysians have? And then after that, you have the people at the pinnacle of power making choices. The Agong chose Muhyiddin back then, with PAS. Now the Agong said, okay, show something else. So this is the bigger issue. If you have a leader like Anwar Ibrahim who cannot be counted on, and then you know, how will Malaysia interact with the global community? That for me is a serious issue. We need a better way to find
Okay.
better leaders.
So let's move ahead, and I think that's a good segue, right? So what would success look like to you for this government? Well, you can say, okay, this government has done well enough. So by the time the next election, if the
So yeah,
government lasts until the next
for me,
election,
I'm on
thought-
record.
Yeah.
You know, with Masa, I doubt I'm on record, and I'm happy to go on record to say I don't think Anwar will last long, despite his two-third majority.
And that's
The
because
structure of politics in Malaysia is, you know, it's not about serving society. It's about power. And there is a facade. I mean, we've seen the amount of betrayal, and then once the people leave, the kind of stories they tell. It's like, how did these guys ever sit next to each other, and how are they working together again? You know. So
Luckily, I didn't say that. I only say that he was screw up.
so for me, success, not for me, but success for this unity government is if they can reach, they can last until
the next election, right?
I think there is a
Jason?
there is an expectation that this unity government will crumble before 6 months. To be honest, there's an expectation among what you call the non-Malay Muslim community. These are the people that I interact most with, and even among the Malay friends I said, they say, well, just like what Kian said, yes, some of them do say give chance, but there is an underlying, to me, like the people I talk to, there is an underlying sort of like pessimism. Yeah, that's a better word for it. You know, they don't want to put too much hope, and it has to do with the betrayal into the GE14, and so everybody is like waiting for another Sheraton move version 2 or 3 or whatever you want to call it, and they're waiting for something to happen. You know, everybody's waiting for the other shoe to drop, to be honest. Hence why I say he's going to screw up, he as in Anwar Ibrahim, and somebody's going to come in and swoop in and take the reins again. And I may not go as far as Greg, but I do think something is going to happen. It could come from UMNO, I don't know. It could come from Bersatu. As so far, I haven't seen the signs. Maybe I'm missing something. But what I understand is that the people are waiting for something earth-shattering to happen. And when that happens, nobody's going to be surprised. Everybody's like, okay, well, back to square one then, you know. So
if UMNO decides that the top 2 posts for their party elections are not to be contested, would you guys be okay with that?
A very bad idea.
Yeah, it's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
You think it's a bad idea?
Because I think it would basically call Zahid's bluff in that, you know, he has been the one postponing any day of reckoning within the party, and he is the one who is in the most precarious position, arguably, out of all of those in this unity government. And he needs to gain some legitimacy. Don't forget, he only won his seat on what, 350 votes?
Mm-hmm.
Thereabouts?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Barely, yeah. Barely.
Mm-hmm.
So he is really in no position to, you know, delay a contest. If anything, he should contest it. And perhaps, you know, in the tradition of many such government politicians, use his government position to ensure that he wins. And this is part of the game that these guys will have to play. But yes, definitely not contesting those positions, not a good idea, and definitely not good for stability of a unity government.
Yep.
And my point. So again, you know, structure, critical path dependence, critical juncture agency. All Malaysian political parties are undemocratic. Anwar,
That's true.
That's true.
You know, there is absolutely no way to hold leaders accountable for failures at election. You know, in Australia, you don't do well, out you go. No matter how close you are, out you go.
Yes. Yes.
Malaysia, And this is where, to that earlier point, I said that after 60 years, these are the 6 best Malay Muslims Malaysia has to offer. It's a shame. And the problem is the political parties. The way they choose their leaders, the Democrat, how democratic those parties are, this is the basis of the problem. You know, capable young Malaysians, whether in DAP or in fact, DAP appears now to be the most democratic after a long while. But, you know,
in the
PAS,
name.
Bersatu, yeah, only in name. Bersatu, you know, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, unless he goes, he chooses to go, no, he's not, he's going to be there. Okay, Pejuang, Mahathir, okay. But, so this is the, so, you know, in some ways it's UMNO who started, or Mahathir who started this rot of, you know, holding on to power, and then, you know, destroyed, I think, many capable Malay leaders who could have come through UMNO. So,
but brought
Yes.
up Anwar Ibrahim in that process, by the way.
and then
Don't forget that it was through making UMNO undemocratic
exactly.
that Anwar Ibrahim became the
Anwar will
number
know
2.
this,
Yes.
you know, how he just smashed everyone using resources, the media and so forth. And his team Wawasan is now one in Pejuang.
Yeah.
So if,
Right.
you know, this is a challenge for Anwar. If he wants to democratize Malaysia, and it's also the challenge to UMNO, you have to democratize UMNO, and then you have to democratize PKR. And then, so this
That's not going to happen, right? Anwar is not going to democratize PKR, right? I mean, he has had multiple opportunities for that.
So that my neat model, this is the critical juncture where agency is required at the elite level.
Right. So you think this is a time where that could possibly...
window of opportunity where everyone is equally unstable, where you can experiment. So basically, fighting the rules of the game so that we can all compete better. Okay? And it requires a collective effort, like PAS, Bersatu. Look, guys, this is not good. We have to find a way to create better leaders. Let's all reform. Okay, and then we compete. So this is that moment. Whether they do it, that's history will tell us.
Right. Any other indicators other than lasting till the next government, till the next election?
So,
Any other indicators of success? I mean, even though PH was there for less than 2 years, and I think they get a lot of stick. There were a lot of things that institutional reforms that they did try to implement. In some matters they did implement that were really good. So do you guys see any such very, very feasible, very visible barometers
criticism earlier of civil
success?
society? So again, you need to understand civil society. As I said, for the longest time it was almost a hegemonic, you know. So civil society had very little space, and you know, there was almost like a strategy. There were those on the outside who would make money, and there were those in the inside who would make.
Civil society was tied to the opposition before 2018, but now the opposition is in government. So
from Reformasi, civil society became part of Reformasi as they saw that this was the best way. So civil society becoming now advocates part of the political movement, which then led to 2018. And one of the problems then was that almost all of civil society went into government and then creating a vacuum in civil society. Now, civil society in Malaysia, by and large, now take the incremental approach. So as Kian mentioned, you know, I remember talking to a South Korean trade negotiator in an earlier life working on trade negotiations. And the US, when they were signing a US trade agreement, free trade agreement with the US really screwed them. And then I asked South Korea, why don't you fight back? He said, isn't that it's a question of options? Okay, we don't have much options. We need the US to help us against North Korea, okay, and China and Japan. Okay, so we know we have the human capital to compete in the economic sphere, no matter how challenging the requirements were. But without the US, we are not going to be able to withstand North Korea, China. So this comes to that earlier point. We can work with the corrupt UMNO. We can work with corrupt GPS. But it's going to be extremely difficult to work with a corrupt Islamist party who has a vision of Malaysia that is.
But that happened until 2013, until
and
2016.
This is where PAS has played an excellent game. They had the long, they had this long game plan, okay? And they're moving, of course, individuals at the apex of PAS had taken different, but it was PAS, without any doubt, wants to make Malaysia an Islamic state in their own conception. That's not it. So Farid No,
Sure.
happy to work with,
Sure.
and many people liked Farid No, Ustad Fadil No, sorry, Ustad Fadil, the late Ustad Fadil No. My apologies, yeah.
Fadil, yeah.
So he and in fact, PAS provided the basis for many of those demonstrations. The unit Amal was central to organizing. So PAS played an important role. But then after 99, when they did well, they took a particular direction under Ustad Hadi Awang, and it seems it's not just non-Muslims. He has purged the moderates from PAS. Mat Sabu, say what you want. He was a PAS loyalist. And then the language that Ustad Hadi Awang is using against him. Nick Omar, such a decent guy, the kind of language, the curse that Ustad Hadi Awang is using against him. So it's not just that non-Muslims find Ustad Hadi Awang difficult.
But you see, if that is the case still since 1999, why was Anwar and the AP happy to work with them? It seems like even the opposition towards PAS, it seems like a post hoc thing rather than, because if it was all the way about principles, then that coalition shouldn't have been there in the first place.
If tomorrow they replace Hadi Awang with a moderate, let's say the Terengganu Menteri Besar becomes the PAS leader, PAS will be in government, and DAP will have no problems working with. So it's not PAS.
But the AP worked with PAS under Hadi Awang. So this is what I didn't understand.
Not for long.
Hadi Awang was the president.
He was not using the language he has used in recent times. So he talk about a lead. Okay, secular leaders.
Hadi Awang became president in 2002 of PAS, right?
Yes, in 1999, he as the chief minister of Terengganu, he took Malaysia PAS in a particular way. Yes, there were
and they were still in Pakatan Rakyat.
I think you guys all forget the critical role that Tok Guru Nik Aziz has played in all of this. One. Secondly, there were a group of key PAS leaders like Mat Sabu, Lat Salayuddin. So many of them were also a critical part of the idea of PAS, Mujahid. So these are critical factors in the structure of a political party.
Yeah. So
it's a political party, by the way. Let's not forget, it's a political party, not a cult, not a religious group. It's a political party.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. That's precise. So Hadi wants a particular vision of PAS, but there were enough people, which Hadi called Barwa DAP, that time part of PAS, who wanted a more moderate. Nick Omar says this most eloquently, the son of the late. that there's a way of working, how
Yeah.
Muslims should work with non-Muslims. There is no doubt that Muslims will be the leaders,
Right.
but there is a way of working with non-Muslims, which Hadi, up
Right.
to 2013, I think he was curtailed by this sort of moderate, what became Amanah, moderate forces. Hussam Musa also one of them. And yeah, since these moderates have gone out, Hadi has taken, but he seems to have been, he's been vindicated. PAS has done so well. So I don't know how PAS will flow, but yes, the ability to work with different political parties, especially for the most secular type political parties, is they are not an issue. There is an idea of Malaysia. Certainly Muslims are the leaders, but there is a role for non-Muslims, and finding that balance. I think non-Muslim political parties or the secular type political parties can work with that, and PAS needs to decide how they want to go.
What you're describing seems like the Barisan National Consociational model.
Absolutely. It's elite.
So you would be comfortable with that? A Malay-led multiracial coalition.
Is Pakatan Harapan not a Malay-led? Look at the cabinet. DAP is the strongest party in Pakatan Harapan. Yet, how many seats? We non-Muslims have no illusion how Malaysia should be governed. We have no illusion. I guess what Jason is saying, there is like a limit, and PAS has crossed it.
There is a limit. Okay, fair enough. Jason, you want to comment on that?
There is a limit, as long as I think for non-Malay Muslims is that do not totally discount the representation in federal government. I mean, they would one of the things that they say is, why can't we go back to Tunku's days, where senior ministers, at least one or two senior ministership will be in the hands of non-Malay Muslims? Either
the first two finance ministers were Chinese.
So they were saying, what's wrong with that? If the guy can do the job, he can tidy up country's finances. It's all about meritocracy. That it's never been about race, despite what people think. Although, if you talk about the kopitiam uncle, that's a different story. Okay, I can't vouch for that. Okay, but my point is there is a limit. Like Greg's pointed out, they are the strongest member in the coalition. Why aren't they given more positions? But DAP knew that this will always be a Malay Muslim-led government. So let them take the lead, but let us share in the prosperity. That's fine with that. Yeah,
Do you think that actually it's a bit of a sidetrack, but I've always wondered about this. If DAP goes down this road, will the DAP turn into the MCA?
I think you all also
by the Chinese
shouldn't forget many lessons were learned in the great flame out of Pakatan Harapan version 1, 2018 to 2020. And DAP leadership definitely learned from that and is reflected in all the statements and the politics that occurred post 2020. So let's not forget a bit about that. There is context to why it happens the way it does now.
That's right. I think Kian answered half of my question. That's half of the question, and that's part of it. The other thing is that there is a fear. There is a fear that DAP will turn into the MCA. Definitely, because you can see it overwhelming the Chinese. Oh yes.
So people are talking about this. You think?
Yes, from what I caught, people say, we do not want to see another MCA. As you know, the joke I made about what the Chinese are calling MCA, right? So it's just that they are also looking at Anwar Ibrahim. They said, well, if Anwar wants to do all the reformasi, fine, we'll support him. But now that he's in power, is he going to abandon that? And when he abandons that, is DAP going to go down the Titanic with him or not? So there is a cautious optimism among at least in the Chinese, right? And also the Indian community who supports DAP and also the coalition, the Pakatan government. There is a cautious I would say optimism. But yet, as I said, the moment I'm talking about DAP now, right? The moment DAP, forgets the lesson, as what Tian pointed out, and start pulling their weight like last time, there goes the neighborhood, right? I mean, if you all remember what happened to Gerakan, right? Nobody cared about it, right? That's
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
history might repeat itself. Again, I'm pessimist, right? So the history might repeat itself, and so the biggest worry is that despite everything that Anwar has talked about before he became prime minister, it's hardly you hear him hardly say the word reformasi, and that's people paying attention to that. Yeah. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Great. Yeah.
Now, so this is from talking to some of the DAP political aides and also Rafizi a long time ago and Akmal Nasir. So now,
Name drop.
so this was before they became popular. So don't know whether they have changed. So this was a long time ago when they were willing to travel to ANU to give talks to students. Now you can't even say.
I spoke to him in Melbourne in 2016.
Happy to have even 10 people listen to them. So now, so there is an idea of Malaysia elite, so consociational model. Now, consociational model requires there are 4 areas of autonomy. One of them, forget all 4, but respecting cultural rights. And when one of the parties veto, it is a veto. And Barisan Nasional, through the strength of UMNO, collapsed that model. Some say at Tun Razak's time with the creation of Barisan Nasional, but certainly as UMNO became powerful under Mahathir and Anwar, so that's why the hatred. Now, one thing about PH as a structure, DAP is either stronger than PKR or, at 2018, they were slightly less than PKR. Now they are stronger than PKR. So, it's really hard to ignore when you are a bigger party. Because MCA and MIC, even at their height, were nowhere close to UMNO. MCA, MIC needed UMNO to win. DAP doesn't really need PKR to win. They have their bastions. Now, this is the interesting about DAP, especially Chin Tong and I believe Anthony Loke. They are moving away from a Chinese-based party, and I understand there's a tussle in the heart of DAP, whether it's a Chinese-based party or a middle-class party. So the Chin Tong, the Ken Mings, the Tony Puas, Yo Bin, the Hannah Yo, they are the middle class. So the centrist party, we are not here about the Chinese community, we are here about middle class Malaysia. And if you want better education, we are here for you. If you want better utilities, we are here for you. So that's why they are very strong in the urban area. And as Malays modernize, and of course there are nuances in the Malay community, some say being more conservative, some say, what modernization should do, policy-based, evidence-based, deliberative democracy. So that in that way, DAP is curtailed from becoming MCA structurally. Okay, they are not MCA in Barisan Nasional. They are a very different political party in Pakatan Harapan. And their rejection of cabinet ministers' posts very politely, in my understanding, yes, lessons learned, but also they are confident that they can get what middle-class Malaysia wants delivered through this unity government. Okay, and we see that through the kind of policy work that is being done, not only through DAP, but Chin Huat's constitutional electoral reforms, Trisha Yo's institutional reforms, C4's governance reforms. So what in a liberal democracy is where you remove the politics and you move towards formulas, where policy making is not, of course, there will always be the argy-bargy, who should get what. But the more you can move towards formulas, the less politics. And of course, formulas are then more representative. So I'm not interested, it's not so much which race gets what, but now moving towards class. And this ties in with what Rafizi said aeons ago, that PKR has to be a class-based party.
But this is also, and this is also a very middle class worldview, right? This is not necessarily the worldview where we talk about moving for race. I mean, I share those perspectives as well. When Syed Saddiq came on, I asked him about replacing race-based affirmative action with class-based affirmative action. And essentially, you'll get the same beneficiaries anyway, right? But politically, that is a hard sell, right? To get that, to move away from that. Now, I think the AP has done the smart move of going to the background because of the lesson learned. And also they realized, one of the interesting things when I asked Tian Shaw, he said that even as a Chinese opposition MP, because he was from PKR, he didn't get the same level of vitriol from as his DAP counterparts did. Because there is just a level of stigma associated with DAP politicians about their anti-Islamic rhetoric in the past and so on. But we have DAP has sort of moved away from Guan Eng and Kit Siang, and I say this cautiously, right? They have sort of started moving away from those, right? So maybe they can shed that image slowly as we go along. Would you guys agree with that? Ken?
Yeah, sure. I think that what Greg is saying is correct, that DAP is very consciously more middle class now. It's by a function of its urban spread, its urban bastions, and it cuts across traditional racial religious lines. There's no question of that. And the other thing is, it just, I guess, in a way, reflects or reinforces my earlier point, which was that, we obsess a little about civil society, and civil society effectively is middle class. And what they're after, they don't really care who is in power, as long as a particular type of policy development, policy implementation can be done. So as a result, if it is Anwar, in power with UMNO, who cares? Does it result in the policy we want to dig us out of what is our hole? I mean, the other thing we have to remember here, a great majority of people in urban and beyond urban areas, and don't forget, Malaysia is about 70% urban, by the way. A great number of people have been badly affected by about 50% of the economy close to service sector the last few years. Smashed. Jobs have been smashed. Okay? People want to get back to some sort of pre-pandemic sort of prosperity, if possible. And a lot of people are heavily in debt. If anything, I think it's increasingly clear and coming out through some of the analysis and evidence of GE15, it is actually a very economy-driven election result as well. Over and above this so-called green wave business that people keep talking about. And I think the earlier point I was just saying about, our obsession and focus on civil society, I think it's really a question that we should consider, that people are being pragmatic. They don't care so much about the betrayal, the big B betrayal part. Many people are wary about the small b betrayals, sure. But as far as they're concerned, they want results. They want results yesterday, right? Of course, that's hard to come by. But they want something to deal with the very real economic pain that's occurring now. And as a result, if this is a government that can negotiate better policy, then this is the better one. And I think people lacked faith in a past Perikatan government for policy development.
So,
okay, so were there significant numbers of middle class Malays that voted for Perikatan and PAS?
So
I think it's a mix though, that one.
So
But
So if that is true, then maybe that doesn't jibe with
Depends
what you just
where.
said, right?
I think no.
So
I
maybe
think it
the
really
racial
depends
part.
where you're talking about. Which seat, which region.
Yeah. So
Okay, how would that matter in different regions? I guess if the basis for the argument is that it's ultimately about the economy, not about race and religion, that has been hyped up, and the middle class Malays who voted for Perikatan, even the younger Malays who voted for Perikatan and passed,
It's a protest
what explains
vote.
their
This is the thing. Who do you protest against? I think there's broad, widespread acceptance that part of the woes of Malaysia since GE14 time and before has been because of an unhindered alleged kleptocracy, right? Scandal, corruption equals UMNO, fairly or unfairly. And so as a result, who do you protest against? So we saw this, and I think there's enough consensus in the analysis of GE14's vote. Why did PAS sweep so much of the East Coast and Northern states in GE14? Not this one, the GE14, because it was a protest vote. Now,
sure, but in a protest vote, there's still a who to
can,
vote for, not just a vote
can
against.
I?
If there are
now
more
you've got more
options.
options.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, great. Yeah,
I'd
right,
like to tie
right.
this
Yeah, great.
your earlier question about demonization and who to vote for. I think Malaysia can claim the record of being the first to be using fake news in a campaign. Mahathir putting the photograph of Tengku Razali wearing the Kadazan headgear, which happened to have a cross on it. That was an election where everyone thought, so PBS betrayed Barisan National, did a deal with DAP. After the seats were allocated, betrayal. So this demonizing of the Chinese community as represented to bad Chinese, DAP, good Chinese, MCA.
Right.
Okay? Be
MCA,
like
yeah.
MCA, don't be like DAP. Okay? Don't challenge this conception of Malaysia that we have. Okay? The correct conception of
Right.
Malaysia for non-Muslims, follow MCA. Don't follow DAP. Now, because the competitors are now Muslims, DAP is now a sideshow. So again, Mahathir again, how he demonized Anwar. Okay, the use of government machinery to destroy Anwar's image. Now, it could be true, it could not, or it could be untrue. We do not know because we cannot trust the institutions that were used to demonize Anwar. Now, as I said, there is an idea of Malaysia, and that this is a Muslim country and Malays should lead. Let's not be naive about this. Okay, a Malay blood and soil government can deliver to the according to the majority of Muslims. Okay, and there might be some minorities who also believe. Sarawak GPS had no problem believing in that Malay blood and soil government can deliver. That included PAS. So and perhaps that says something about our our public sector is commendable. Our institution, despite perhaps it's taking a regressive trajectory, but you will not say Malaysia is a failed state. The government administration delivers. All right. So, and this was our discussion around whether identity was important with Bridget Welch's article. Yes, it is important. But the issue is whether it's a Pakatan Harapan government or a PN government, they both can deliver. And the earlier aggregate data suggests that yes, Malay Muslims chose Perikatan Nasional to be their representative. Okay. Now, we will need a bit more time there are propositions on how this has happened, but I do not believe that Malay Muslims today, post-racial, no. In fact, I believe it's the converse, and I don't have any negative normative values around this. So the process of Islamization in Malaysia has socialized Muslims to believe that a good leader is a Muslim leader. Okay, in the US, a white Anglo-Saxon Christian will believe only a white. No matter what Barack Obama did, he is not a good leader. Okay, so there's nothing, or in Australia, Scott Morrison for evangelicals, can do no wrong. So let's not take away from, and this is that structure and path dependence. I say we are moving towards a more conservative Muslim nation. I have no illusions about that. And in my, this unity government is perhaps an aberration to what perhaps the people of Malaysia, or at least the significant people of Malaysia, as the electoral system deems important, have decided. Now, if you want a better representation of Malaysia, the electoral system has to change, because it now favors conservative Muslims in all areas that
Change.
So the weightages,
change to what?
Oh, Chinhuat has done. Oh, there's so much of,
So you're talking about the
gerrymandering
malapportionment and
so forth,
gerrymandering, basically, right? But
yeah,
keep the first past the post.
that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah,
but
okay.
The current system
Right, okay.
is not a representative of, if it was distributed more equally,
definitely.
perhaps PH would have already gained, they have seats 100,000, Wong Chen's seat 200,000-300,000, Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if
it's
those
crazy.
were addressed,
Yeah.
perhaps Pakatan Harapan would have won flat out. Didn't even need a coalition. Didn't need to go with Barisan Nasional. So this is the more fundamental questions around the path that we have taken as a nation. Do we want to reform this to become a more equal nation, a more representative nation? What type of pluralism are we looking for? Benign Islam. How will the benign Islamic government look like? So these are the more deeper questions. But to address that idea around demonizing, we need laws. The kind of things that Malaysians get away with is it doesn't make the competition equal. People can only make good decisions if they have good information. If they're getting wrong, fails, misleading, slander, they can't make good decisions based on that. That has to be addressed.
Okay, so we've gone for 80 minutes already. So sorry about that. So any final words from all three of you? So let's start with Jason, Ken, then Greg. Jason?
I think what Greg said just now about having laws, I think institutionalizing certain things like, slander and racial attacks, I mean, we probably won't have something like hate laws in the US to stop that, because then again, hate laws doesn't do much in the US anyway. I mean, they've been thrown around. But I think something similar to that, to stop all this, will be very, very a good start to limit the kind of betrayal and hatred going on. So far as
something like Singapore, basically, you're suggesting.
I wouldn't go that far. Let's not go crazy about that. Yeah.
Okay. It's okay. It's not a Singapore-Malaysia competition.
But I think my point is, there should be some check and balance to all this, or at least something to control human beings. I mean, going back to what we said at the beginning, this is a betrayal. I mean, Malaysian people have been betrayed too many times until I think we all thick-skinned to the point that it's going to be
right.
Yeah, as I said, we expect the other shoe to drop. But what's the next betrayal that's going to come, right? And many may think that I'm pessimistic, but actually they are doing the same thing. They're waiting for it. So I think yes, some check and balance, and I think this new government, I don't think it's an aberration. I think it's an experiment. Malaysia itself is an experiment, to be honest. If you look at the history, because you know the British. Okay, maybe I'm jumping on my historical background. The British did not expect Malaya to survive long enough. They were expected to come back, intervene, and make it into a protectorate autonomy. That's what was the plan. Malayan Union was rejected, and then they're waiting for it to sort of fail. They kept the name Federation, but they are the one running it. So, you know, then again, this is a new direction that nobody expected. That I think I was expecting, to be honest, I expected Ikatan and PAS to run the country, and then we have Anwar in power. So I hope that my negativity doesn't come true, but I'm not surprised it happened. So long story short, let's see how it goes. You know? Yeah.
Right. The good thing about being a pessimist is you are either correct or you are happy, right? So either way.
Thank you, Walid, for yeah.
Okay. Let's hope you'll be happy and not correct. Okay. Kian?
I think, you know, the second chance, unlikely it might be, after the first chance of 2018, is to, you know, implement as many worthwhile institutional reforms as Malaysia can do. And you would have a better chance in a so-called unity government that purportedly has nearly a 2/3 majority than you would have had previously in the last two, you know, post-pandemic governments. So I think, you know, it merits a cautious optimism, because what is your alternative? The other thing is that this can only last if the goods are delivered in terms of the economic repair that needs to happen for a lot of people. And it's a critical task. And I don't think they have a honeymoon period at all, this new government. They need to start showing signs of doing something as soon as, you know, Raya or Chinese New Year comes along.
What's a low-hanging fruit for you in terms of this institutional reform?
Well, I think one thing they are trying to do is redirect the whole subsidy culture, subsidy economy, be more targeted on that. Bit hard and tricky though. The other thing that they're doing the right signaling for, but need to run much harder with delivering the goods on, are issues of food sustainability, food inflation. They have now a food security minister, right? More or less. I think it's in the title. Right. So there are issues like that. And of course, you know, people's housing and extremities of climate and the issues of that. So those are, to me, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit like that. And in some ways, some of it was curtailed in the 2018-2020 government. They could bring that back. So I'm not sure. The other thing, or one last thing, is actually do more serious implementation and rolling out of the Parliamentary Select Committee, in which, if they were smart about it, would be one way to employ the time of a lot of folks who otherwise might be preoccupied with plotting. Develop some policy. I mean, this is, to me, a politically smart way to do it.
That's right. That's some Machiavellian thinking right there. But effective in a good way, in a good way. Thank you, Ken. And I think the inflation thing, it will be a huge, I suspect that will be the issue in the Singapore election as well. This is a worldwide issue, right? But especially in Malaysia, especially the food security, that is so,
don't forget,
so critical.
6 state elections coming out in Malaysia. Critical factors here.
Exactly, yeah. Right. Exactly.
So,
thank you. Great.
Just a shout out to civil society. So, you know, in Penang, actually, the civil society is very critical of the Penang state government. You know, Sahabat Alam Malaysia, I forget. There is several infrastructure that civil society is dead again, but because the DAP government is so strong, so in effect they've become gerakan in Penang. Okay, so shout out to civil society. Given given the constraints that they are operating in, they have been vocal. Okay, and this is also the case across Malaysia. Ideas for the electoral reform, the anti-death penalty. There are civil society, the labor movements. They are doing their part. Okay, but they operate in a very the constraints against them is unbelievable. So they are operating. Now, coming back to my need, structure, path dependence, critical juncture. Now, so again, the idea is up to 2018, the institutions were in equilibrium, but the foundations of those institutions were moving, and those sitting at the top didn't realize it, and then it fell. And it is continuing to move. So, and why I say I'm not confident that this administration will last is because the ground is still moving. The institutions haven't found their balance yet. And that will come through the apex leaders, these veto players, talking to each other and finding what is the new rules of the game. Ken mentioned the 6 state elections. Now, if Perikatan Nasional wins, what will happen? Okay, how will that translate to the federal government? So this, these are critical issues. Now, the challenge that Prime Minister Anwar, PM10, is facing is he knows that to stay in power, he needs to use patronage, but he also knows how tenuous using patronage is. He's seen Najib for all his power and resources, what has happened to him. And Tan Sri Muhyiddin also has seen that, for all the power and resources, what was the citadel, once he became a prime minister, it was like a fortress. It's no longer true. The all-powerful executive is no longer the case, because not only is movements happening in the political parties, but on the ground through there is movement. So I'm not able to say what are the low-hanging fruits, because they're going to have to be selective. PM10 is sending the right signals, but underneath that, behind the media, lots of messy things are happening. Lots of terrible things will need to happen, because you have to placate all these warlords. Otherwise, they are going to undermine you. So, as PM, was that Mahathir 8, or what was it? Kita tunggu dan lihat.
Thank you so much, Greg, Ken, and Jason. Singaporeans have a love-hate relationship with Malaysia. But, deep down, we always mean well for Malaysia. It's, I just came back from Malaysia. I love Malaysia. I love Malaysians, the nicest people in the world. Nicest food in the world, unfortunately, I have to say.
We can be
And
typically uncertain, because we are an uncertain nation. It's been the long-standing issue. The notion of a nation still to be crafted.
Right.
I think
Right. And I think the resilience of Malaysians, right? And in spite of everything, as Greg said, Malaysia is not a failed state. Like, if you look at the movements of the government, you would expect it to be, right? In fact, even before the Sabah election, Malaysia was handling COVID really well, which is testament, almost without a government, right? And it is testament to the civil servants and the healthcare system. Sorry, Jason.
Remembering something, a friend of mine who does a bit of research on Malaysia says, how do you survive in such a chaotic nation? I said, what chaos? I said, you have so many prime ministers. I said, what about Japan and Korea and all that? And what about Australia? Is that chaotic? I say, well, I think it's a whole perception. And you're right. I mean, both Kian and Greg said it very succinctly. We are not a failed state. And then, and because of this, okay, maybe I should embrace the chaos and say that it makes us resilient. It makes us resilient, and it,
Absolutely.
again, I think we thrive in all this chaos, if you want to put it that way. And I look forward. I mean, despite my pessimism, I want to see what happens next. Let's say that. I want to see what happens next.
I think we can
So,
be optimistic to be, in that little anecdotes of tales from the Kita Jaga Kita white flag, black flag moment. There's a lot that tells you about Malaysia in those tales.
yes, I agree. We don't have the red shirt and yellow shirt thingy, but I mean, not like that. The one in Thailand.
All right. And even in spite of the religious rhetoric at the political level, the quotidian interactions are very different, right? Very different from Malaysians. Like, people get along and people are just nice to each other generally and polite, So I think maybe there's more cause for optimism than Jason. And maybe secretly he's more optimistic than he lets on also. But
Right.
thank you so much, all three of you. It's been a pleasure. And
No,
sorry
no.
that we went.
Thank you.
We
Thank you very much,
fun. We
Walid.
had fun.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again.